Welcome, and thanks for listening to this week's episode of
The Milk Production.
The Milk Production.
Hi, thanks for joining again. We are once again not together as co-hosts today. Russ is traveling, as am I. And so I'm doing this episode solo. So I will be your host for the day. I'm Meaghan Selke. I'm an international board-certified lactation consultant, mother to 5 beautiful boys who I've been so blessed to have in my life, and lover of reading pretty much anything, and listening to Audible. Love Audible. So that's a little bit about me. If you haven't tuned in before, when I am solo, I am trying out this series called the Tata Teachings. And my hope is for these that I'm able to give some very specific foundational knowledge about what breastfeeding should look like, and in that first year in particular. And hopefully you can take those nuggets and use them in tactical ways in your everyday life. So today we are going to be talking about, so I love using free resources. So last week I covered crashthepumpanddump.org. And this week I will be using the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine's handout on Physiologic Infant Care. And the reason why I like to use these free resources is because there's already so much good information out there. We don't always know how to get it or where it is. And so I think for me, my goal is not to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but to really point you to these very good quality resources and references that you can use as education data points in your breastfeeding journey or pumping journey, or not doing either, just sort of interested in the subject. So today we'll be going into physiologic infant care, and I will let you know when I'm diverging with my own opinions and my own sort of additions to the context that Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine is providing. But what you can know from this resource is that the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine has doctors, PhDs, nurse practitioners, breastfeeding medicine professionals who really dig their hands into the science and rely on research really made for and geared toward the education about experiences of families who are breastfeeding and what's physiologically normal for them. And so it's founded in good quality research. It's not the kind of research that was like, oh, well, there weren't any females in this, but we found out XYZ. That obviously, isn't as applicable for our pool of people that we're trying to reach. So it's good to know what your reference data set is, and that's from foundational. It's a cornerstone in how the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine really approaches their education to the wider audiences. And the audiences that they try to educate include practitioners of all different types who engage with families or breastfeeding families, or postpartum families, and also directly to parents, to lactating parents, and other parents who are maybe considering breastfeeding or pumping or some version, some combination. So as I said, we're going to go into the Physiologic Infant Care handout that they offer, and it's focused on supporting breastfeeding, sleep, and well-being. And you can think of that as applicable to baby and the lactating parent. So all of those things, breastfeeding, sleep, and well-being, are critically important, especially in those initial days postpartum, but certainly for the first couple of years when you're doing those things as mother baby or lactating parent and baby. You are this dyad, you're this couplet that experiences a lot of these highs and lows. If you're having challenging with breastfeeding, you're going to be experiencing those lows together. If baby's having trouble with sleeping, you're going to be experiencing those lows together. And if you're not well, baby can be experiencing some sort of stream effects from your maybe mental health or just overall well-being or something like that. So this concept of the dyad and the couplet and that kind of thing will be pulled throughout this piece that we're talking about here. And it's good to understand that we should be treating families in that postpartum phase like that. Like the lactating parent and the baby go hand in hand. They're a couplet, a dyad, whatever you want to call them. They go hand in hand and should be treated as such. So, the focus for this, I think, is to talk about and address the real challenges associated in the postpartum period, but the importance also to continue to breastfeed at night, and that's biologically normal for baby and helps them grow. It maintains milk production, lactation amenorrhea. So the absence, this is, by the way, a Meaghan edition, not on the sheet. Lactation amenorrhea is like, okay, so it's the absence of your period while you're breastfeeding. Sometimes people don't experience that. Sometimes your period comes back even if you continue to breastfeed overnight. But for a large number of people, your period will not return as long as you continue to breastfeed every 3 hours overnight. And some people use that as a prophylactic to prevent future pregnancies. I would not recommend that. I would use other methods because you never know when your period is going to return. But it is a method that people can and do use. And so another component to sort of, breastfeeding through the night, being able to help maintain your milk production and those types, and helping your baby grow. So in this handout, the information is kind of divided between things you do at night and things you do during the day. And in the night category, there is, there's some tie to different types of sleeping methods, how you choose to sleep with your baby. This can be a very touchy subject for some people. Some people have very strong opinions about co-sleeping. In other words, they're very, very big champions of it. Some people have very strong opinions against co-sleeping. In other words, they can't believe anybody does that. It's a risk for the baby, et cetera, et cetera. What we're offering here in this piece of literature that the ABM put out is not to sway you to go one way or another. It's just to educate you about some of the things associated with sleep at night. And we will probably deeper dive into something like co-sleeping and maybe touch on the two very distinct mindsets and maybe even talk to some people about why they feel that way. I'm not one to say that either one is right or wrong. And I think it would be good to maybe have an opportunity to talk to some people who feel strongly and understand why they feel strongly, especially if you're pregnant and you're like, oh, well, I don't know what I want to do. Or, you've heard information about one, but not the other. And why would you want to do one versus the other, et cetera. So hopefully that's something we can tee up for the future. So at any rate, back to the handout here. So things going on at night that can better support breastfeeding, sleeping, and overall well-being for mom and baby, or lactating parent and baby. Top of the list, also backed by the American Academy of Pediatrics, World Health Organization. I mean, pretty much any medical group agrees that you should sleep near your baby. One of the reasons why Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, or ABM, talks about it is because of the ability to fall asleep more easily near each other. If you haven't had a baby yet, you can imagine what it's like when you go home and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm solely responsible for this little human. Or you've probably even heard friends talk about little anecdotes where it's like, oh, we got home and then all I wanted to do, I was so tired, and then baby fell asleep in the crib and all I wanted to do was sit there at the edge of the crib and look and make sure baby was breathing. If you're sleeping near your baby, and that anxiety starts to decrease, you'll feel like you are able to be more responsive to baby. And further, you will have, if you're breastfeeding, quicker access to baby in something like a co-sleeper, either attached to the bed, like a sidecar style, or a bassinet right next to it, or something like that. And hopefully with that type of tool next to you, you are going to be able to avoid getting up at night. And, the idea, I got a bassinet, which I can't remember the name of it right now. It doesn't matter, but it's the kind that rotated on the pedestal. And so the theory was you pull it over the top of your bed, so the side kind of pushes down and you can reach in and get baby. And so all you really have to do is sit up, pull this thing over the bed and use them. And I got that for Jackson, did something completely different with Aiden and Everin. And I used it. It held clothes and diapers and that kind of thing, because it ended up not being, my bed is really tall, and it ended up not being able to go all the way over the height of my bed. It was just probably about an inch or two too short to go over it. So that was a little bit of a disappointment. But I digress. So the idea is to avoid getting up at night. And so if you can find something like that, or if your bed's maybe not quite as high as mine is, and you can find a bassinet that sort of rotates over like that, or any other version like a sidecar where you just can easily access baby, then you can avoid disrupting your sleep as much as possible, right? So same idea with diaper changes. Now, if your baby is one that has BMs frequently, which is a great thing, that's biologically normal, and that's a great thing to see, then I would not recommend skipping the diaper changes. But if your baby is just voiding at night and not stooling, then you can use something like a barrier cream to make it so that you don't have to do diaper changes at every feed throughout the night. That'll, again, help you avoid getting up at night. And to that end, keeping the lights off. So whatever you can do, partner, hey, this is a note for you as well. This is certainly something that you can help with. Whatever you can do to set it up so that the lactating parent has everything that they need when they go to sleep at night to do those feeds through the night, the better. That way you're not going to have to turn on the overhead light or whatever else at night to sort of bring up that level of like, oh, now we're like really awake, and then have to feed baby and then have to come back down from that. So it'll be less disrupting to everyone's sleep. Electronic devices, minimize the light on those. So it's very tempting, especially if your mind gets going and, you're awake breastfeeding baby, trying to keep things dim and chill. Maybe your partner's asleep and everything is kind of quiet and your mind gets going. You're like, oh, I want to Google that thing real quick and see what they say about X, Y, and Z. I mean, I do this all the time. And it's 3 a.m. and the next thing you know, an hour and a half has transpired, and the light from your electronic device is keeping you awake. Not to mention, you're just like coming up with more questions that you can search the internet for. Try really hard to resist that, because that's only going to, again, get you up to a level that you're going to have to come down from to fall back asleep again. If you are combination feeding, they talk about how breastfeeding at night, as opposed to pumping and using bottles, is going to be better. So a couple reasons why. One of the reasons is that your breast milk contains melatonin. So that helps baby stay, in that sleep ready state. And so that's a benefit, obviously, for baby. And if they're not directly breastfeeding, then they're not getting, or maybe you're saving it for later, then they're not getting that melatonin at a different time of day. Now, again, Meaghan addition here, this is not on the handout itself. I do get that question a lot, where it's like, should I be marking what time I'm pumping my bags, or what time, this bag of milk was pumped or whatever, so that I know? You absolutely can if you want to. And if it brings you peace of mind, sure. But But there are other people who, I mean, especially when you're an exclusive pumper and you've got a pitcher in the fridge, because that's what's going to make, your measured bottles easier when you go to freeze it. And, that's the process that's working for you. Don't overthink the melatonin thing. It's not, that much of a, it's not going to make that much of a difference for babies. It's not like babies who are breastfed or bottle fed pumped milk that don't have melatonin in it now all of a sudden aren't going to sleep. Just something to be aware of, that it does have melatonin in it, and that is made to help baby sleep. So further on the handout, they talk about how pumping and bottle feeding can disrupt sleep. So, I mean, if you just think about it logically, it makes sense. If you are having to piece together all your pump parts and you're having to pump, and then your partner's, taking the bottle and having to sit up too, and maybe there's some lights that are needed to plug in the pump, or you find one of the little rubber pieces is not sealed all the way, or the pump, now you got to open it all up and re-put it together. And all of those are extra steps to do. Now, again, these are for my combo feeders. So people who are electively combination breast and pumping and bottle feeding, consider doing breastfeeding overnight instead of doing bottles, to see if that helps get more sleep and, make it so that you and baby are getting more sleep overnight. For my pumpers, there are ways to make that easier. And even for moms who are like, no, I absolutely want to pump at night for whatever reason, it's easier for you. Okay. There are ways to make it easier. A couple of things come to mind. The first is, as long as there are no issues in terms of like baby's immune compromised or something, or baby's premature, those types of things, I would say are contraindications for what I'm about to say here. And again, this is in addition to the handout. This is not on the handout itself. It's a Meaghan edition. You can bag your pump parts in between use and put them in the refrigerator. Just like you pump your milk and you put it in the refrigerator. And you can do that for up to 24 hours. Now, you do want to make sure you're washing your pump parts at least once with warm water and soap every 24 hours. You do not need to sanitize your pump, certainly not after every use, and not even every day. This is a huge time saver for my exclusive pumping moms, and I think it's really important to foot stomp this. But when you're doing this overnight, does that mean then you have to go down to the fridge to get it you can get the pump parts out of the fridge? Maybe you have a cooler. Maybe you have a cooler with the bottle in it and your pump parts in it, and that's keeping it, for the overnight period. Maybe you had a pump session at 11 p.m. and baby's going to wake up again by 2 a.m. And so you leave the milk that you pumped at room temperature and you use that room temperature milk instead of pulling out maybe frozen milk or something like that to give to baby. Finding ways to ultimately save time if you are an exclusive pumper and choose to pump and bottle feed overnight, even if you're a combo feeder. Finding ways to save time will ultimately help you get more sleep and get back to resting, at least during that period. So avoiding feeding solids or formula to improve sleep. So sometimes I hear, a bit of a, I don't want to call it an old wives' tale, but something like that, maybe a myth that formula helps babies sleep better at night. That's actually not true. From a research perspective, there was no increase in the amount of sleep for formula-fed babies as compared to breastfed or pumped breast milk babies. And so, especially solids, solids bring up an interesting point. We talked in a previous episode, I can't remember if it made the cut or not, but we talked in a previous episode about recommendation to add rice to bottles. Some pediatricians recommend that when babies have cases of acid reflux. The idea is that it keeps the heavier food in the belly, right? And when you're doing that for any other reason, for example, trying to get baby to have more calories to sleep a longer stretch at night, that's when it becomes not recommended. That's babies are biologically programmed to wake up every 3 hours to feed, and that's totally normal for the first several months, if not the first year. And trying to sort of circumvent that process by adding more calories from a food that is not necessarily adding much in the way of nutritional value is not the way it's designed and not what's recommended. Further, if you're giving baby either solids or formula and not stimulating your breasts for those additional calories in the way of expressed breast milk, then that can negatively impact milk production. So what does that mean? Mom wants to sleep for a 6-hour stretch, so you decide to have the partner do a bottle at the 3-hour mark in between, and mom does not wake up to pump. Well, then your body doesn't know that baby needs that milk. And so in the next 24 hours, it's not going to make up that difference. So you have to kind of stay in sync with the demands of baby. Now, one-off time, because mom is absolutely fried, it's been a rough couple of weeks, or baby's been having a really hard time sleeping or something like that. That's not going to ruin your supply or anything like that. And there are ways to try to make up for that amount during the day. However, the best way to protect your milk production is to try to stay in sync 1-for-1 with what baby's consuming and what you're producing. So just keeping that in mind about trying to avoid solids and or formula to try to increase sleep. So back to the handout, another thing they talk about is not sleep training in the first 6 months, and it's also not recommended in the first year. This is probably painful for some people to hear, especially like my type A moms who really like a schedule, or even my moms who have had other babies who are like, if we don't have a schedule, there's no way I'm going to be able to get my arms around this circus. And, mom of 5 kids, I hear that and I understand. The Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine talks about something called a cued care program for infant sleep to help parents cope. So what do they mean by this? So cued care is a way that we as care providers, or any care provider, can respond to baby, can best respond to baby. So they might be indications of hunger, tiredness, readiness to like interact and talk or play, some sort of bother, like they're upset about, diaper change or something like that. Babies have these cues to communicate with us what's going on with them. And so the cued care sort of approach is tapping into what baby's trying to cue to us and responding to that. And the idea is that when you're able to recognize that cue and you're able to respond to baby and give them what they need, it helps parents cope, because it's going to go from a screaming, crying baby about whatever it is to a baby who has its needs met and who is now no longer sleeping. Now no longer screaming and crying. So what does that look like as it pertains to sleep, for example? Baby is cueing that they're tired, but it's coming out as crying. So cued care and the responsiveness for that might look like, okay, this baby needs help falling asleep. So instead of saying, okay, well, you're going to sit there and cry, you're going to instead pick baby up and try to soothe them to the point where they're able to fall asleep. Now, I probably just said something that could make a lot of people angry because they're believers in cry it out, or, other people are like, no, what are you, crazy? Like, I would never let my baby cry it out. Wherever you are on that, that's its own battle that I'm not even going to put my toe in the water on that one. But again, the approach here is that you're using these cues to address baby's needs so that ultimately parents have an easier time caring for baby, because a baby that's responded to and is getting their needs met is an easier baby to care for than otherwise. So again, promise this already, but bed sharing does come up, and I really like that that's okay to talk about now. So there was a period in the world of medicine where it was actually bad to talk about bed sharing, not condoned. And if you brought it up, it was kind of like, well, what are you doing? We're trying to get this whole, back to sleep campaign to be as effective as possible. And it is. It's incredibly effective. Back to sleep is really, really great in terms of SIDS reduction. But it's also really important to talk about bed sharing, because I think the research is something like over 50% of families have done bed sharing, and a great majority of those have done it accidentally. And so that's what the handout talks about here is bed sharing accidentally occurring, and that's why bed sharing safety is important. So one of the things that we all, well, I shouldn't say we all, one of the things that you'll hear about in terms of breastfeeding is the side lying position. Side lying is wonderful, and we're going to talk about it when we talk about daytime. Actually, did we talk about it on daytime things? Let me see. No, we really don't. It's like on a like sidebars. Anyway, so they do talk about side lying on this handout. Which is a great position. I mean, it's wonderful. It's really good, especially in those early days when you're feeding 8 to 12 times a day, and your neck and your shoulders and your back are starting to hurt, because no matter how many times you remind yourself that you're supposed to bring the baby to the breast and not the breast to the baby, you find yourself hunched over, or you're sinking into your bed pillows as you're sitting upright, and that's just becoming increasingly uncomfortable. I mean, sometimes you just get sore from doing that so many times a day, and side lying is a wonderful reprieve from that. Now, there are ways to do it, and we can talk about that. But imagine yourself, trying to keep the lights dim, trying to not get up out of bed to feed baby, and then you're deciding to do a side lying breastfeeding position at night because you're trying to sort of keep everything calm and smooth and let baby fall back asleep easily. And then you fall asleep while you're side lying. And then you end up bed sharing. And so that's an example of how bed sharing is very frequently unplanned and then inadvertently occurs. And that is when it can be risky. Because there are certain parameters that we should use to make bed sharing safe. And that is another Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine handout. And I, again, think we'll probably deep dive into that when we talk more about whether, the different sort of approaches about co-sleeping or not co-sleeping, or bed sharing or not bed sharing. But we're not going to go full tilt into that just yet. If you're interested, of course, go over to the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine website, and look up the handout that they have on it, and it's very informative, very useful. The other one you can use, La Leche League, I think has like 7 steps for safe co-sleeping or something like that. But the bottom line theory for both of those is make your bed safe for bed sharing, especially if you're not going to be getting out of bed to do it. And even if you're feeding in something like a recliner, you've got to be really careful. This is a Meaghan edition, or the couch, right? You've got to be very careful about how you're doing that. And if there's any potential you might fall asleep, those are places where you don't want to, no matter what you do, there's not really like a safe way to fall asleep and feed, in a recliner or on a couch. And so just knowing the basics about what safe bed sharing looks like is important, whether you decide to bed share or not. So hopefully that doesn't belabor the point too much, but there's a lot of good information to be gathered in that space. Just as a sort of sidebar, because that's the way they have it on here, before we go into what things to do in the daytime, just talking about side lying. You can side lie, say, for example, you're laying on your left side. I think we've talked about this in the first Tata teachings that we did, which is like an hour and 45-minute class on the essentials for breastfeeding, very high level. But we do talk about side lying. So arm out, baby underneath, at the breast here. And, baby would be on their side, you're latching baby, maybe you're having to support your breast or something like that. Sometimes families can find this difficult in the early days. When babies are a little bit small, it can be hard to figure out how to position baby just so while you're on your side, or you feel like they're just really rolling into you or something like that. So look out for that. And if it's feeling like it's like you're not quite able to position baby effectively, then don't try side lying until baby's a little bit older and you're a little bit more comfortable with it. But you can do side lying. So if you're laying on your left side, you maybe would start by feeding from your left breast. And then instead of, which is what I used to do, instead of rotating over to your right side and telling your husband, hey, hold the baby for a second while I roll over to my right side and then pass me the baby and I'm going to bring the baby over here and set baby up in this position. You can side lie on your right breast from your left side. And the way that you do that is just by tilting your body more so that your right breast is down toward baby's mouth. And, again, if you're feeling like you can't really maintain baby's position well, this is not the ideal thing to be trying. But, if you're just able to rotate your hips and sort of rotate your shoulders a little bit more so that the right breast is now in front of baby, then you're able to not have to flop from your left side to your right side. Now, again, I for months would switch baby from left to right. And that's with my 2-year-old, my youngest one, who I was a lactation consultant with. But it is nice, as he's older, to be able to do side lying and not have to flip him around because he got heavy quick. So that's convenient. So switching gears a little bit, talking about the things that we can do in the daytime to best support breastfeeding, sleep, and well-being. It's very similar to the concepts that we've talked about and the tools that we've talked about implementing during the nighttime, except that obviously you're going to be a little bit more awake during the day. So the first thing that comes up is wearing your baby in a baby wrap or baby carrier. I love this one. And if you ever get to wondering like, oh, are they building, bad habits, sleeping on me? They really don't develop those sleep associations for the first 3 or 4 months anyway. Again, if we're following the guidance of not sleep training certainly in the first 6 months and not even for the first year as it's recommended, then this is just a great way to soothe baby. Hopefully this isn't TMI, but I found it even helpful. Like if he was particularly fussy and I had to pee, like I could actually do that and keep him happy without hearing him crying in the other room because he needed to be held, or if he was ready to fall asleep, but I really, really had to go to it was more convenient to do pretty much everything. I mean, I've vacuumed while he's fallen asleep in the baby carrier. And this is for all 3 of my boys. I liked doing the baby wrap or the baby carrier. It's, it gives you an opportunity to have 2 free hands. And so, eating a meal, making a meal, just reading a book, walking. It gives you the opportunity to, again, treat the lactating parent, or any parent, really, this is good for the partner too, and the baby as a couplet and a dyad, right? There's that closeness and that support that baby's going to continue to need in the months after being born. And the baby wrap or carrier is a really good tool for that. And I mean, my husband used to carry my son around town in that thing. I mean, I think probably till he was like 9 or 10 months old. We loved it. And, as they get older, you can face them outward and they can engage while you continue to be able to have 2 free hands to do whatever it is that you need to do. So very, very helpful. When they're young, make sure that baby's back is supported, they're held firmly and close to your body, and not their face is free. So the ones that I loved were the fabric stretchy ones. And each of those, you should follow the manufacturer recommendations for each of those, but just some pointers in terms of the face is just make sure that face is up and away from the fabric. So the fabric can kind of come over the chest like this, and their face should be in an open space above, sort of where they start to overlap and would maybe potentially get in baby's face. That just makes sure they're able to breathe comfortably. And then you want to be able to just kiss baby's forehead or rest your chin on their head or something like that. You don't want them to be sinking down too low. I mean, for obvious reasons, but that would be a good height to have their head. So back to the handout. The daytime. Another point that they make is that daytime activity could potentially help babies sleep better at night. And so activity can be as simple as baby's sleeping in a bassinet in the living room and you continue to play music and vacuum, or you have a toddler and the toddler continues to play in that space, and the noise and that kind of thing keeps it so that baby's not quite fully as deeply asleep as they might be. Other things you can do are have them do tummy time. That's a really good sort of daytime activity, or go on a walk. Even if they fall asleep again, it's this, encouragement of being out in the daytime activity kind of environment with sunlight and noises and, not as deep a sleep as we would hope to promote in the evening. Now, one of my favorite ones that I think is hilarious that's on here, it's true, right? Everybody says nap when your baby naps if you can. That's true. So yes, do that. But I saw a really great reel the other day of this mom being like, oh yeah, me trying to follow that advice of nap when your baby naps, and she's wearing her baby, and so she's doing the laundry and she sees her baby's asleep, so she just passes out on the laundry room floor to try to take a nap. Or she's cooking dinner and she sees her baby's asleep, so she just stops making dinner and falls asleep. I mean, it becomes impractical in certain situations. However, if you can, is the important part of that phrase there, right? Nap when your baby naps if you can. In reality, yes, that can be hard in execution, but the more support, the more opportunities we take to ask for help from family members when they ask, what can I do? How can I support you? I want you to stick around, while baby naps and finish the laundry load that I was doing so I can actually nap while baby naps. Ask for those types of things and see how much you can do that. It obviously, again, becomes impractical at a certain point, but take as much advantage of the times when they are sleeping as it's possible. So again, it talks about focus on baby's behavior cues and goes on to say that you don't need to use tracking apps. Focusing on baby's behavior cues tied back to that cued care approach to caring for babies. Continues into the daytime, obviously, but the tracking apps are not needed. Meaghan addition here, my 2 cents on this bullet point is that tracking apps can be really useful, especially in the beginning when we need to be knowing how frequently are we feeding, when was the last time we fed, when do we need to feed again, is baby getting enough, is baby gaining enough, has baby had enough pees, has baby had enough poops, so the tracking apps can be useful, but they have a time and a place. If baby's regained birth weight and peeing and pooping like a champ, and you have no real data points that you need to be gathering for your next, for example, pediatrician appointment or lactation appointment or whatever it may be, then absolutely, tracking apps aren't needed. Following baby's cues are ultimately going to be the best way to go. That's on-demand feeding, and that should be happening even if you are using the tracking apps. We should be doing on-demand feeding, especially in those early days. Following those cues should be happening even if you are using the tracking apps, but tracking apps are not needed is true in certain circumstances, in my opinion. And I think in other circumstances, they're incredibly useful. I also think it's important to say that it's okay if this tracking app makes you feel less anxious. This data makes you feel less anxious, being able to look at it and know. That's important. I routinely tell my families that the thing that is stressing you out the most, let's try to address that first. And, if it's, I don't know what I haven't been tracking baby's weight, or I don't know how many pees and poops have happened in the past week or something in the past day or something like that, then using a tracking app would absolutely give you that information. But you have to be careful, because sometimes when you're tracking those things, you are becoming too focused on the data and not as focused on your baby's cues. And I'll give you an example of what that can look like. So my pediatrician told me with my Aiden, my almost 13-year-old, that he should have, and this was in the first week because he was very jaundiced, he should have 8 pees and 8 poops in 24 hours. Now, again, I wasn't a lactation consultant with him, so I was like, we got to get these 8 pees and 8 poops. What I didn't understand, and it probably not for lack of him telling me, I was probably just too sleep deprived to piece it all together and remember all of it. I just remembered 8 pees and 8 poops. And what I didn't understand was that number of poops is, on the higher side of normal. And some babies only poop once a day, sometimes less. Whether that's normal or not is a totally different topic. But eight poops is a lot of poops when you're talking about, a 5-day-old baby or something like that. And so when we got to 24 hours, we had 8 pees and 7 poops. I sat on the nursery room floor and cried. And I routinely tell my families this story because we called the pediatrician. We said he only pooped 7 times in 24 hours. And, he probably chuckled on the other side of the phone and was like, it's okay. That's okay. I was just telling you, the idea is to get him to poop as absolutely much as possible to move that stool out, because the bilirubin pools in the stool. And so having them poop is going to help them decrease that hyperbilirubinemia. And once I realized that, obviously I took a step back and realized that I didn't have to be sitting on the nursery room floor crying. But, I like to use that point to just illustrate that sometimes we can become way too focused on the numbers. And if things are going well, and babies queuing to feed and eating every 3 hours and those types of things, and we're not worried about weight gain, or we're not worried about jaundice or something like that, then these are instances where absolutely a tracking app is not needed and can sometimes just increase anxiety. So something we already talked about a little bit, getting back to the handout, and the last bullet point on here is to ask for help, from other caregivers. So again, friends who are asking, hey, can I stop by? Can I bring you a meal? Can I do this and that? I mean, with DoorDash, like I would do it so differently, asking for help, from friends or family. I mean, I can get food. Don't make me any food. Just like my mom did when she came to stay with me, help me with the dishes, do a load of laundry, vacuum up, whatever, just little things that you would stay awake to do during the day when baby's napping or when you have a moment. Try to ask for help from other caregivers, to do that. And then also ask, okay, I've just finished breastfeeding for 30, 40 minutes and now I want to eat a meal. Can someone take baby and do the swaddle and put baby down, or change the diaper while I get comfortable and set up to feed, or the baby needs a new outfit. Can someone else do that? Or I want to hang with my 2-year-old. Can somebody take the baby? Or I've got to breastfeed. Can someone hang with the 2-year-old? There's so many opportunities for partners and other caregivers and friends and family to best facilitate the breastfeeding and the sleep and the well-being of the lactating parent and the baby. That you come up with those creative solutions and don't be afraid to ask for that help. So hopefully this was helpful information to go over, and this is a free resource. The reason why I choose to detail these free resources is because there's so much good content out there, and I just want to make sure that it's being pushed out to young families, to new families, to expectant parents, and that they, one, know where to go and how to find it, and then two, can maybe get a rundown like on a commute or on a walk or something like that. And I'll include a link to the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine site and to this handout as well in the show notes. I'm so glad you tuned in for episode number 8, and I look forward to being back with my co-host next week. Hopefully with a little bit of glow from being on the beach for a couple days. And as always, have questions, send it in to the milkproductionpodcast@gmail.com. Send us a comment through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find us. We always love to get comments, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.